This black man is holding his fingers. He took his first bite of fried chicken. Then he asked the driver where to throw the bone, but the driver just rolled down the window.
We do this. This is what we do.
The black man laughed out loud at this scene, so he followed the driver's example. One threw the bone out of the window.
There you go.
But as they waited at the traffic light, the girl on the sidelines was shocked and amazed. A noble white man chauffeuring a black man. This was almost impossible in 1960s America. But when the girl stared at him, Tony not only didn't care, he made the friendliest gesture he could. Who would have thought that just a few months ago, Tony was an extreme racist? Then his wife offered two workers a drink of water, and then he threw the glass in the trash in disgust. When his wife saw that, she was very upset, but she didn't say anything because Tony was the backbone of their family. Tony worked as a security guard in a bar. If anyone makes trouble in the bar,
Tony live!
All the owner had to do was yell. Tony would show up right away and he'd take care of all the trouble as fast as he could. But that wasn't enough. Occasionally, Tony would bribe the teller with a tip, and then he'd sneak out the most important items. The customer would soon be furious, and every time, Tony would show up just in time.
My hat! Heard it was missing, so I looked into it.
And then all Tony had to do was pretend to help, and he'd get his fame and fortune. To support his family, Tony was always looking for ways to make ends meet. Every day, he'd come home at dawn. But one day, Tony went too hard on a customer who was causing trouble. He was a very powerful man. The bar was shut down for months and Tony became unemployed. He had to find a way to make some extra money. So Tony entered the Big Gulp contest. If he could beat Fat Paul, he could get $50. But Fat Paul could eat 24 hot dogs in one sitting. Halfway through the contest, Tony was already in over his head. When his wife heard about it, she thought Tony was crazy. But Tony can't be that lucky every time. His rent is due next week. Tony had to find a job first. So, on the recommendation of a friend, he went to a pianist to apply for a job as a chauffeur. The interior of the office was ostentatious. There was even a parade of ivory. Tony couldn't help but sit up and take notice. But what he didn't realize, the pianist Shirley, was a black man. He was high up on the throne, and he hit the nail on the head with his first question.
Do you foresee any issues in working for a black man?
No. No.
Tony had to compromise to make ends meet. Shirley needed more than just a regular driver. He's planning a national tour. Most of the shows were in the South, and at that time the South of America, where discrimination against black men was at its worst. Tony had to get Shirley out of trouble to make sure the show went well. The whole job lasted about 8 weeks. For $100 a week, with food and lodging, Tony had finally reached the end of his rope. He was willing to accept all the conditions, except for a black man who was his valet. In the record company's inquiries, Tony's name came up more than once. A lot of people were impressed because Tony was a natural at solving problems. That's why Shirley called and asked, and Tony was willing to step back for $125, and he'd take the job without being a servant. Of course, there's more than one way to make a buck. He helps his friends with their troubles. He'd get paid a lot less. He might not even have to go back to the bar. But Tony had his limits. He'd rather pawn his favorite watch than be separated from his family. But the next morning, Shirley called. She said yes to everything Tony wanted. He asked Tony's wife if she was willing to be away from home for a long time for this job. And even though his wife was sad, Tony couldn't eat 26 hot dogs every day. Before he left, the record company handed Tony a green book, The Black Man's Guide to Safe Travel During the Holidays. It detailed the hotels in the South that were willing to accommodate black men